Welcome to Laurier's Teaching Excellence Conversation Series. I'm Deborah Van Eyneton, Academic Director of Teaching Excellence and Innovation at Wilfrid Laurier University. And today I'm with Marybeth White from the Religion and Culture Department in the Faculty of Arts, who received the 2024 Sustained Excellence Award in the part-time category. Marybeth has been teaching as part-time contract faculty member at Laurier for more than 18 years, and her passion for creating a nurturing and engaging learning environment shines through in her teaching practice. She works to foster inclusive classrooms, teach diverse course materials, and expand students' perspectives on the course material and the world. By integrating diverse assessment methods, such as reflective journal exercises and optional final exams for first-year students, Marybeth demonstrates a deep commitment to reducing student stress and promoting inclusivity. I'm very excited to talk with her today. Well, Marybeth, thank you so much for joining us here today. You are a Sustained Excellence winner. You've taught at Laurier for 18, 19 years now?
Almost 20 this year.
Almost 20 this year. What are some of the most significant changes that you've observed in students over the years, right? Like, today's students, what do they seem to take on more easily than earlier students, or alternatively, what do they struggle with more than earlier cohorts did? So what have you kind of seen over time?
Part of what I've seen in the positive feature of students nowadays is their willingness to be forthcoming. They do knock on doors. They do ask questions. They do challenge. And I think this is in a positive way.
Absolutely.
I think it's good that they advocate for themselves and they seem to know how to support themselves. Not all students, but I see the majority of students are well disciplined in moving through and advocating for themselves. So that's the benefit. Some of the struggles I see that I wonder could it possibly be through social media is reading. That's the first and foremost. I don't feel that the students really read what I've put on courses as their required readings. Yeah. So that I see as a problem or a challenge, I guess. And then one of the other things that some students seem to struggle a little bit more with are deadlines. I see deadline and completing things on time. So I've tried to shift my focus to accommodate for that. But deadlines seem to be pressing. But part of that, I think, is also previous years. Like if I go back 20 years, students who were attending university were just attending university. I hear from my students, a lot of them have two jobs, not just one other part-time job, but some of them are working more than one job to try and pay for their schooling. So I understand the readings and the deadlines being more challenging when you are not a full-time student dedicated to just doing that. You've also got other employment issues that you're balancing.
Yeah, and certainly if I think about change over time as well, the role that education plays in the lives of students and also how they view education is a little bit more instrumentalist, right? It's not the educational experience itself.
Right.
It's a means to an end.
Correct.
Right? And then we kind of think, how does that impact the way that we design our course materials, et cetera? Yes. So then how have you responded to this over time? So, on the positive side, right? The students willing to put themselves out there and to engage and to challenge. So what does that mean in terms of course design or classroom activities for you?
A different approach. I feel when I started teaching, I offered what I guess I would call like a constellation approach, where I'd gather beautiful materials I thought were beautiful, and I'd put them all together, and somehow the students would recognize that there's this common theme and they're beautiful, and we could have discussions about them. And I think a lot of that was because that's how I was a graduate and undergraduate student. So now my teaching really is far more focused. It's like, okay, what do I want the students to have as their takeaway?
Right.
So I do think in terms of takeaway. What is it that when they leave my classroom, they have with them in their pocket or in their toolbox as something that they can build on later in life? So that is definitely my course outlines. The way I design the course is far more compact. The readings, I've cut so many compared to 20 years ago,
Oh,
what I
I
had them
know.
reading.
Yeah.
So it's really the essentials. And I look for a lot of resources that are articles as opposed to chapters or books now, just to try and keep things compact. So that's a massive change that I've made to the way I approach teaching for where they're coming in. They need to hold on to something and they need to leave. And as you're saying, it's far more for employment purposes, not for the older thinking of higher education as a place to think,
Find yourself
find
as
yourself.
a human,
Correct.
as a citizen of this world, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Far
Yeah.
different. So
It
it
is,
took me
yeah.
a while. I see pros and cons with that, but it has to change because this is the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I kind of think about it, so to what extent do you try to push them to stretch? We know they're not reading, right? And we know data tells us that the amount of time that students can actually focus is getting shorter and shorter and shorter because of social media and phones and the way in which they interact with text. So we know that, but we need to
Push the boundary a little.
push the boundary and make them stretch. But how do you do that?
One of the courses I teach, Love and Its Myths, I mean, it lends itself to a first-year student. So
Yeah,
I look
yeah.
for required reading textbooks that are short novels that we can then really engage with the idea of love and fit it into the themes that we're working
Oh,
on
I
in the
love that.
class.
Yeah. Great. Now, it's your teaching dossier certainly shows dedication to students both in and outside the classroom, right? You're a teacher, but you're also a mentor. So, did you have mentors, teaching mentors, earlier on that you kind of think this is what I want to be for my students?
Absolutely. I mean, I have had nothing but amazing mentors here at Laurier, at University of Waterloo, because I did the joint PhD program. I also had mentors in my undergraduate years at York U, teaching assistants as well as professors.
Oh, great.
And so I admired how they presented material, how they made you think or stretch yourself, which is what I do try and do with my own students, is move beyond the box that you perhaps have come with to see things in a different perspective, in a different light. So for that, I am ever grateful for the mentors I've had. And I really try and do that for my students as well, to try and, well, critically think about what it is you're being presented. And in class, I do tell them, this is the academy. This is a conversation that's taking place. So you can have ideas, you can have opinions. And what we do is come in and explore those, right?
Yeah.
That there's not one way, especially in arts. We've got so many different ways of approaching
engage, yeah.
materials and engage. So I try and be that kind of mentor for my students as well. But I would say in my time here at Laurier, there's one professor that stands out as my teaching mentor, and that was one of our teachers, emeritus, Michel Desjardins.
Right.
I think
Yes.
he has so many students of
Yes.
his who have embraced teaching because of his compassion, his rigor, his wisdom. So yes, I would say he was one of my foremost professors who really got me thinking about life as an academic, doing a PhD at teaching.
And teaching. So he
Teaching,
was the one, is that,
he
it
was
was somewhere in an interaction with him that you thought, I could teach.
exactly.
I would like to teach. Right.
I would love to teach.
Yeah.
He made our classes so engaging and so fun, and yet we were always thinking. So yes, I wanted to do that.
I love that. Your teaching philosophy really emphasizes developing the whole student with a focus on inclusivity and experiential learning. Can you talk a little bit about what developing the whole student means to
Mm.
you, right? Because you're really approaching your teaching holistically.
I really endeavor to listen to my students. I think that's part of that whole understanding that the students coming in the classroom want to learn about the subject I'm teaching, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
That they have lives outside of the classroom. They have challenges, they have joy outside of the classroom, extracurricular activities in the Hawks. I mean, they've got so many different things that they come to in my classroom. So I think understanding that whole student, um, understanding that a lot of the courses I teach are electives. So this may not be their major. This may not be where they have to focus all their attention on. So understanding that, I think, is part of the whole student. And then aside from listening to hear what that student has, it's developing that student so that they see beyond the classroom. The whole student as a leader and a part of our citizenship moving forward beyond this university and into the world. So trying to have a more experiential learning effect where they can take something and really understand it, not just intellectually, but apply that out in the world beyond the classroom.
And
So
then think
that's
about
what I
where they
mean.
fit vis-a-vis that understanding. Hey, what's my place?
What's my place in
Yeah.
this world, in
Yeah.
this city, in this, absolutely. To develop that understanding of the whole student.
And is that what lies behind your reflection exercises that you do with the students? So
Yes,
talk to us
it
a little bit
does.
about those, because a lot of faculty are starting to, really dig into the reflection assignments.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So my reflections, I always encourage the student to reflect on what they've learned in the class because they have to demonstrate they've learned something from the
Link.
class.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
But then I ask for an application outside of the classroom. It can be personal experience, which some students do share, but it could also be a reflection in a current event in society.
Yeah.
It could be a reflection, movie, novel, something, interaction between people, because my courses tend to involve culture, religion, love, these kinds of elements. So looking for that outside of the classroom, recognizing when they walk into a restaurant what a particular statue might be meaning in that
Right.
restaurant, especially in our pluralistic, multicultural Canada. I think it's really important for the students to take that away and apply it. I think religious literacy
Right.
from the Religion and Culture Department is imperative that people have an understanding of other people's traditions. So I try really hard to do that through reflections. Yeah.
But you also respond to, like in thinking about developing the whole student, right? You also provide quite a bit of flexibility in your course.
Mm.
So, can you talk a little bit about that, right? Students can choose their own pathway, I think, through your courses.
I do allow a lot of maneuverability through the
Yes.
class.
Yeah.
So, for example, if there's tutorials, I'll have a participation grade in the tutorial, but only X amount will count towards their final grades. So, if they're ill, if they miss one, it's not, the end of the world.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They may have a shift at work or they're ill, something comes up. So, I understand that. I will usually offer multiple reflections of which X number need to be submitted towards a final grade. Again, something comes up or it didn't resonate with them. A particular
Right.
section of the course they just have no interest in, didn't resonate, or something occurred in their personal life that prevented them from really digging in and engaging in that. So those are the opportunities that I give. I like also with the final exam to make
That is a
that
great, yes.
optional. And
Yes.
I kind of went out on a limb at Laurier. I didn't know how that was going to be.
So tell us how you set that
hmm.
up, because I think that's a really interesting approach.
The way I looked at it was coming out of COVID, many of the students had gone through high school
Absolutely.
and not had any
Any exams.
exams.
Yep.
The anxiety levels were quite elevated.
Mhm.
And I thought, Some people excel in exams, some people freeze. So what I wanted to do was give students the opportunity to make a choice. If they felt comfortable with the course materials and they felt that they wanted to move towards possibly elevating their grade, then they can opt to take the final exam. And they have until the ninth or 10th week, depending on the course, to determine whether or not. So they've got a lot of their grade already to make that determination.
And you have lots of different components, like I'm just thinking about that wonderful quote in your dossier where you talk about you quote, is it Barbara Coloroso?
Yes.
Right, the parenting
Barbara
style, the jellyfish,
Coloroso.
the brick wall, or the
Or
spine.
the
So
spine.
you have quite a variegated spine, right? You have them doing lots of different things. Like it's not like they're not working in the class.
No, exactly.
So
There is work to be done,
yeah,
and they have to do that and make that decision based on what work they've done.
yeah,
But if something occurred and they're looking like things are really uh, perilous, and they
yeah.
may actually fail the course or they're right on teetering on the edge, they have that option to write
Escape
that
valve.
final
Yeah,
exam and
yeah,
show, because it's the whole term that the final exam is based on. It's
yeah.
not just particular sections. So they have to prove, yes, I can pass this course. I understand the material. So yeah, I try, like Barbara Coloroso, to offer that.
That's
I'm not a
great.
jellyfish. I'm not full of compassion with no rigor, but I'm not so rigorous that I'm a brick wall on, inflexible.
What I like about that option, so, an optional final exam, you're engaging the students in thinking about their own. Like that in itself is reflecting, how am I doing? I need to assess where I am at this moment in the class. What do I need to do to get to the finish line, right? And what is it that I want to have achieved?
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And so we often don't do that with students. We lay it out with them, this is what you need to do, but don't really involve them in assessment of the, pathway forward.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. So I do. I try, and because, like you say, some students may be quite pleased with a D or a C.
yeah,
That is what their goal was in that elective course, working two jobs. They needed to pass, and they got their 59, and they're okay with that. Whereas for an A or a B student, that
they'd
may
be
be
like,
like,
no
no
way.
way.
Yes.
So
Especially in that transition, when you've got a lot of first year students that are making
correct.
that transition to university, and
Yeah.
it's a big transition, and I think getting bigger.
Yeah. So COVID taught me how to be even more flexible with
Yeah.
this, again, a new cohort who had no skill set really in that and a lot of anxiety around it.
You have really, you write in your dossier about, making a real effort to diversify your course materials to include different
Mhm.
cultural and religious
Mhm.
perspectives. You know, talk a little bit about that. How do you choose the new materials, and then what has been the impact with students? And
Mhm.
I have to say, there's wonderful quotes in there from students who
Oh.
are like, I didn't know that about my religion, right? Like, wonderful. Yeah.
I think part of my awakening to this was relatively early on here at Laurier, when I was given the beautiful task of designing an online course. And I was taking an older version that had one particular view. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we diversified this and look at
Yes.
all the different religious traditions? And I felt that that would be fun. Now, for me, based on my PhD, I had a good amount of information, but I had to do a lot more research on other
Yes.
forms of
Yeah.
love. So it was really wonderful to put that together.
I was going to say, spending time researching
Oh,
other forms of love. I mean,
yes. I mean, what a
yes.
wonderful,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. So I
Right.
really enjoyed that, and I do hear good feedback from students about how much they appreciated
Yeah.
even a tradition they didn't know about. I had no idea about this or that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so again, developing that religious literacy and seeing other traditions and how their views arise. But then there's another course I teach, Religion in the Americas, and a lot of second generation students would come back to me and say, I now understand my parents, and I loved that. I absolutely
I
loved
now
that.
understand my
I
parents.
exactly,
That's
as a
precious. Yeah.
second generation immigrant, I know why my parents felt this was so important for me to understand about my traditions and my
Yes.
culture. And yeah, I think that was so rewarding for me because it felt like perhaps there was some healing there because I know those second generation students are traversing two worlds at the same
Absolutely.
time. And so to
Absolutely.
hear that feedback, it was beautiful. Yeah,
Great.
so that's why I think the diversity, but you asked too about the materials. So with my materials, there is not a single way of being Hindu or a single way of being Jewish. So you have to read a lot, but you have to ultimately make some decisions as to how you'll present it. So I tell the students numerous times how these are traditions, that there are Christian traditions, there are Hindu
Right.
traditions.
That's right.
So I did have a student once say, you know, I'm from the Caribbean and I'm Hindu and I don't recognize what you're teaching.
Right.
So this is very much the reality. I have to remind students that depending on where geographically or what branch of a tradition, I'm not going to cover them all. And so I try and seek kind of the core understandings of each tradition, and then traditions that are have been marginalized and repressed, such as Indigenous traditions, to ensure that what I was providing and presenting as love in Indigenous traditions was accurate. And again, you can't cover all the Indigenous traditions, so I am trying to find what will interest students and what is localized here in the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe communities in this area. So to
Hmm.
try and keep it more local. Yeah.
But that in itself, right? If you're providing a core
Hmm.
that students can engage with, they're learning, right? So
Yes,
that may not be I may be Hindu, I may not recognize myself in what you're doing, and yet I can engage with that material,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So, again, you're encouraging that reflection, that discussion, that,
On
yeah,
diversity, even within your own
that's right.
tradition, which
Right.
is important. Different
Right.
interpretations, different understandings.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
implications for society,
Yes.
of
Absolutely.
having this diversity, right?
Absolutely.
But, I think one of the most important things that we do on this campus is creating brave spaces to talk about things.
Hmm.
And if we can't talk about diversity, right,
Yeah.
and share perspectives, even though we may not agree or we may not see things in a different
Hmm.
way, then, where are people going to be able to engage in that kind of discussion?
Absolutely.
Right.
It has, I mean, this is part of learning,
Yeah.
right? Is to encounter difference and then to learn about that difference and to have ideas and to express them and trying to create, I guess, what's been called the safe space in the
Yes.
classroom,
Yes.
and to honor and respect the different ideas and opinions that
How
come
do you do
forward.
that? Because you're talking about religion.
Yes,
That can get
it,
heated,
it can be.
right? So how do you prepare students to engage in a way that's reflective, constructive?
I think starting by explaining, even within one tradition, there's so many different
Yeah.
interpretations. So to recognize that each student comes with their own history and their own understanding of identity, whether they're religious or non religious, and that provides a frame, but to understand and listen to other encounters is beneficial and that they don't have to agree, that I make it very clear that they can disagree. Again, this is the academy.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
can disagree, and I do explain the difference between an opinion of disagreeing versus factual understanding of why and what supporting evidence you need to bring to bear. If you want to totally disagree with something,
Yeah.
what alternative are you offering and what supporting evidence are you using? So again, it's a teaching moment.
Yeah.
It's that moment of understanding diversity and difference with compassion and love for our pluralistic and multicultural way of interacting.
And so linked directly to that, you are really engaged in universal design for learning thinking in
Mhm.
terms of classroom activities, course design, right?
Mhm.
Which, provides a way of recognizing diversity, of welcoming students who are coming from, with different sets of skills and abilities into the classroom. So, and you've been very engaged with teaching excellence and innovation on this. So talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of your course design in your classroom.
Mm. I think with universal learning, I came through understanding through my interactions with Accessible Learning
Yes.
Office
Yeah.
and understanding the different ways in which people learn, whether they're visual learners or auditory learners. That was the initial beginning of just difference. And then learning even deeper how supportive the Accessible Learning Center is for people with different diverse ways of
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
And so when I heard about universal design, I didn't know what it was at first. And then coming to the different teaching and learning and figuring out, oh my goodness, this is such an amazing way to design a course so that you are attempting, you can't universally design for every single, but for a broad way of going on. So that, for example, I have a whiteboard which students provide notes so that note takers are not really required in my course, which is one of the accessible learning accommodations, because everybody contributes notes. Not only is it a benefit for a student who might require a note taker, it's a benefit for everyone.
Everybody,
If you
everybody.
miss the class,
Yes.
well, you've got my PowerPoints, which I make very clear are only outlines. The
Yep.
details are coming to class, but you've got an outline, you've got the reading material, and you've got notes from students. So if you can look at all that, you might be able to figure out what exactly was talked about in the lecture if you missed it. Tutorials are another great way to, again, encapsulate that learning moment, figure out what it is that may have been missed. And then I have office hours, so you can come and talk to me. So that's one aspect of universal design. Not having a single date for the Dropbox is another. I usually offer a 3-day, sometimes 1-week window, depending on
Right.
when it is. But I do also say I will provide extensions. I'm okay with that. If I can't grade them all in one night.
No.
So if they need an
Yeah.
extra few days, I'm still grading all the others in the inbox. So that's okay by me. But the requirement is that they have to ask for it before the day it's due, because I'm not granting one. It means
No,
to
in the
me
moment.
you
Yes.
haven't
Yeah.
thought
Thought.
it through.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've thought it through and you go, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the basketball team and we've got a game and I've got a midterm and I won't be able to get that done. If you send me that email, I'll grant you.
Yeah.
I'll
We'll
grant you the
figure it out.
extension. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. So those are some of the ways I've adopted universal design, and having only X amount, of the reflections towards the final, so that students have the way to maneuver with their other classes and any accommodations they may require.
But also
hopefully
just
it's
various ways to
taken in.
demonstrate their learning.
Exactly.
Right? Because not all
Reflections,
students, yeah.
quizzes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Tutorial participation,
Yeah.
note-taking participation.
Yeah.
These are all ways in which the students engage and earn their grades.
We've had some wonderful discussion in this series too about instructors who offer very different kinds of assessments. Like students can do a visual art, project, or they can do a written project, or they can, do an oral presentation or a podcast, or, allowing students again to demonstrate their learning in different ways, ways that speak to them, right?
Exactly. And I have had students now.
I was going to ask, how do students respond when they,
When
when they realize, the flexibility and the openness to, again, taking different
taking
pathways
different
through?
pathways. Well, the first time I ever offered, instead of a written reflection, one of the reflections in the courses is a visual reflection.
Yeah.
So they had to do a recording on their cell phone, and they didn't have to be on camera. And the response I got overwhelmed me, because some of the students were horrified because this was like totally out
Yeah,
of the
what are
norm.
you asking me
That's
to
right,
do?
and very
Yes.
concerned. And uploading, I had to learn a lot about different formats
Yes.
of videos and uploading.
Yes, I've been there.
Okay.
Especially during the pandemic, right?
Exactly. Yes.
When we remember March of 2020, when we
2020.
ended up suddenly going home and I had senior students doing final presentations, and well, you're going to have to video yourself and we're going to have to upload and I'm going to have to learn.
Exactly. And that
Yeah.
was the impetus for
Yeah.
doing something more creative. But I had one student who did like a puppet show.
Oh,
It was on Romantic
that's so
Love, I remember,
great.
and they did a puppet show. So they
I love
filmed
the
the
way you do
puppet
that with your
show.
hands.
Yeah. And I've had some
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful creative moments. So it's been fun exploring the different ways. And I have had some students do audio recordings instead of written work.
Yes.
It's preferable for them.
Yep.
So as long as they're conveying what they've learned, and that's part of an assessment, I'm good with that. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be written.
I wonder if I could draw things to a close by asking you, what's one thing that stands out that your students or colleagues have taught you over your career?
I think from my students, I've learned to review constantly the course materials.
Right. Yes.
I remember once offering, I think there were 3 core books, and I was getting vibes. They did not
Yeah,
like.
it wasn't resonating.
No,
Yeah.
one of them was
Yeah.
really. So I thought, and it was a book I loved, philosophy book.
So it was hard to give up.
It's hard to give up. It has such incredible depth.
Yeah.
So I teach about that book now in my class, but I don't make them read it.
Right.
Because what I did, it was at the time of Survivor and
Oh,
being
yes.
voted off the island. So I put on my learning space, I put together a vote the book off the island.
And that one just got
And
turfed.
it just got tossed. So I thought, okay, unfortunately, this book is no longer resonating at
Yes,
all
okay.
with this community.
Oh,
So
vote the book off. That's funny.
students teach me, I have to listen, but they teach me.
Yes.
And what I
Yeah.
have found
Yes.
in my 20 years here is the student body changes, our way of delivering a course changes, that we must continually learn, that the university as a whole will continue to change. And from that point of view, to not fear. I think at first I feared, what am I going to do now? Like, I have this brilliant course. How am I going to tweak it? What am I going to change? But that was something Michel Desjardins said. Michel said, when you teach the course the first time, it's like a prototype.
Mm-hmm.
And
A
it's the
pilot.
tweaking that refines. And what I've found is you never arrive.
Yeah.
You are always tweaking
Even though
and
early in your
refining.
career you think you're
You
going to
think
get
you will. You'll bring out the
Yes.
yellow pages and you'll
Yeah.
No, it's always, what can I do differently this time? What materials can I present either differently or different materials? So I think what my colleagues and students have taught me is to be alert, to respond, to listen to what is on the ground out there in the classroom, to not be like separate from that, so that we'll always hopefully be learning. Like, this will be a continual process of ongoing learning, and that our teaching skills will continue to evolve, and we'll continue to learn about how to teach whatever next community of students will come in, because they'll be different again.
That seems to me to be the definition of sustained excellence in teaching. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you so
Marybeth.
much for having me, Deborah.
My thanks to Marybeth White for joining me today, and I hope you will join me for more conversations that celebrate exceptional teaching practices, explore diverse teaching philosophies, and discuss the future of higher education teaching and learning.